Stop! Don't go anywhere too fast. It's time to listen to a Head Over the Footy podcast.
G'day guys, welcome back to Head Over the Footy. We survived the first week, we got through it, the people listened, the people watched, the people subscribed on YouTube, they followed us on Spotify, gave us a rating, and it was absolutely outstanding, so thank you for that. Today we've got an epic show coming up. The footy is back officially. None of these practice games. We spoke about that last week. We're into the real thing now. Opening round happened, and now we're getting into round one. And we've had a bit of a reshuffle this week. We've had a few changes.
It's been some tough selection calls.
Well, Charlie Gill is joining us today for the first show. We're going to clear the air about the reshuffle that's happened. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Charlie Gill. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks, Max. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, mate, tell us a little bit more about yourself. You're a Carlton man. You do a little bit of stuff at the well, I shouldn't say a little bit. You do a fair bit of stuff.
Yeah, I take offence to that.
Yeah. Well, you're a legend in North Fitzroy.
Well, I'll take offence to that as well. I think that's a bit over the top. But Max, I mean, I've been running a community newspaper for North Fitzroy for a couple of years now, and it's been really good. And I've never been on a podcast before either, so I'm usually more comfortable in print media.
You're facing up now.
And I'm facing up, and that's hard for me. But but we'll see how I go. I've always loved football, so I'm glad to talk about it on the national stage, given that this is such a soon to be widely listened to podcast.
Absolutely. We're brand new. We're still small. I'll own up to that. We are small still.
Boutique.
But we are growing at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
And Charlie Gill, it's so good to have you. Now, we spoke about a pre-show, how we met. We thought we better let the audience know. A bit of context for them. They're listening to the show now.
Yeah.
We went to school together.
Yeah.
And we developed a bit of a rivalry, it's fair to say.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, I didn't recall it that way, but
Well, look, in terms of our footy talk, all good friends, you're really offended by this, aren't you?
No, I'm not. Look, it's true. We did sort of form a little bit of a rivalry early on because I was sort of the Carlton supporter and you were the Collingwood supporter, and we're both very passionate and very outspoken. And
you're very articulate. You were
and you're not, which is again, it's part of the rivalry.
Correct. And you're very good at debating. You were not, when it came to sport and anything, you dominated at school. So you know your stuff. You know how to crack an argument and get it going. But you also know your footy. You're a Carlton supporter, all right?
Understood.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Okay.
You're a Carlton supporter, and it's actually the perfect week to have you on because Carlton had an amazing win.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that.
And now I'm here. I've got my latte and I've got my almond croissant, and it feels, we're in Richmond, but it feels like I'm home in North Fitzroy, and it's good to be here. But there were some promises about the croissant being on the company card and so forth, but I don't think about that.
We'll quickly address that. We're going on here, aren't we? But this is some good content, I hope. But in terms of our company card and your croissant that you just bought from the cafe down the road, unfortunately can't be on the company card at the moment, but we are looking for sponsors, okay? So if you're out there, please, if you enjoy the content, sponsor us and we'll have the money coming in, and then we can put your croissant on the company card, Charlie.
Yeah, okay, good. All right.
But Anna and Will, they'll be back unless they've done a runner on us, but I'm 100% sure that they haven't. They're going to be back in future episodes. Charlie Gill has joined us. It's so good to have him on board. He's going to be coming on as well throughout the season, and he does a really good job. He's intelligent. We didn't mention your ATAR before in your introduction. He's got a...
ATAR is irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, but we'll mention it because it's not irrelevant. It's not irrelevant.
It is.
People still have a bit of merit. They give it value, don't they? The ATAR, which is the school grading that you get when you finish high school.
for international listeners.
Well, interstate listeners.
Yeah, true. Actually, that's true.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, you got a good ATAR. I don't have to let you respond to that. But let's talk about everything on the show today. We got AFL Opening Round review, Cox's Antics, the Blue Baggers, the Mighty Suns, Dimmer Hardwick, the Pies Premiership Hangover, Grundy's Swans.
Yeah.
So there's some of the things we're going to discuss. Plenty going on. We're going to talk AFL Grand Final Best of 3 series. A few of the interstate AFL club bosses have been talking about that, so we'll get our heads around that. And then we got the round 1 preview. There's some huge matchups coming up in round 1, Charlie. I'm looking forward to telling you about a few of them. Yep. Why are you laughing?
Just I've heard about them already, but yeah.
Well, that's good. So you've done your own research, or have I told you pre-show?
Yeah.
I did tell you about one of them. We'll get into that, and then we're going to wrap it up. But guys, so much to look forward to. And just remember, guys, our podcast comes out every Monday. Charlie, isn't that right? We record our podcast every single Monday, whether it's with you, Anna, Will Faulkner. Our squad might grow to a few more members as well. So every Monday we record it and we drop it in the afternoon. Okay, so it comes out on audio first on Spotify. We're working on getting on Apple Podcasts as well. And then later on it'll be on YouTube. All right, so just stay tuned for that. And I think that's everything for the intro. Let's hop into it. AFL Opening Round, Charlie. We're going to review it. Now, the first thing off the top, it's been a talking point, AFL Opening Round. Was it good? Was it not? There was a lot of talk about it. So what I did was I put out a podcast. No, I didn't put out a podcast. I put out a poll. I gave them 3 options. The options were yes, no, more yes than no. Was opening round a success? Now, we had 32.9 people say yes. We had 52.6 say no. And 14.5% say...
Can I just point out that's a little bit of
yes
biased?
No. Well, from my... Yeah.
Yes, no, and more yes than no is the third option. Why didn't you include more no than yes?
Because... Well, it's a good point. But I don't think you can... I think if you're more no than yes, you're a no. But... Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that makes no sense.
Well, anyway, just see it as it is. Okay?
Yeah.
We had 46 people vote, and at the end of the day, right, what we got out of this poll was 46 people voted, and it was pretty much a 50-50 split. People liked it, people didn't. It was a 50-50 split.
Because yes and more yes than no sort of mean the same thing.
Well, yeah, pretty much, pretty much. But I thought that my opinion of it was opening round was good. It was a yes for me, but there was a few things that could have been done that weren't. Okay, but overall, I was a yes.
It was more yes than a no.
Well, yeah.
Well, there you go.
What did you think of opening round? But just before you get into it, I'll give you a bit of an overview of how it went. There were games in Queensland and New South Wales. Yeah. The crowd's attendance were 21,000, 22,000, 33,000, 40,000. This is in rugby states. Okay. We obviously had Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Carlton. They were the Thursday and Friday night games. Saturday was Gold Coast and Richmond. Yeah. And then GWS played Collingwood. Yeah. Okay. 2 prelim final rematches. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, I was more no than yes.
Yep.
Because I think that it's better for the AFL season to start with a bang rather than a whimper, which is exactly what I thought the Melbourne-Sydney game was. And obviously you can't judge it just on the quality of the game because you can't factor that in when you're fixturing. But there's something about, and obviously I'm biased being a Carlton supporter, but the Carlton-Richmond game has, I think, slowly, as it's gone on, gathered a certain sort of, not prestige, but kind of...
What's the word?
What's the word?
Well, it's obviously, it's a tradition and
almost
people
a nostalgia about it.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been going on long enough for it to have that. And I feel like it sort of marks for people, especially young footy fans, the start of the season. Yeah. And having it sort of feel like we're already halfway through by starting the season with a game between Melbourne and Sydney that could happen any random time and not a game that sort of marks the start, the way that Richmond Carlton does. I think it's obviously a decision the AFL made. About prioritising interstate sort of domination over a more sort of harmonious approach. And when on that sort of matter, I usually, tend towards thinking that it's better to have, a more harmonious sort of approach where everyone's playing at once and it's not staggered and it's not.
So playing 9 games in a round.
Yeah.
Well, that's created a headache because there's 8 teams that have played, the rest haven't, and there's buys now, and teams could be 4-1 while another team could be 3-1.
And no one knows what's going on. Like, we would know because we love footy so much, but
it confuses
it's like,
people. Yeah.
Imagine like who's got, I don't know which teams who played last week that isn't playing this week. Do you know?
There are buys coming up. I don't know if the buys aren't this week, but they're the following
like
week.
Having the buys so quick, it's like, for the sort of average footy goer, it's like, I wonder who we've got next week. They're trying to get into the season. They're trying to buy in. Yeah. And it's like, there's no game.
Yeah. That's why I'm yes, but there were a few things that could have been improved. And that was probably one of them.
Yeah.
It was the fact that some games were played, and I think a lot of people are having this issue. And now these buys, and people don't like the fact that there were only 4 games. Why couldn't we have games in Adelaide? Why couldn't we have games in WA? Why couldn't we have games in Victoria? These are the questions that people are asking. Now, to start the season earlier for these clubs might have been a bit of a burden on the clubs, might have been a bit of a burden on the AFL, whatever. But my thing is as I'm Victorian. I was born here, raised here, right? Yeah. I've lived in Adelaide. I've lived in the Northern Territory. Mm-hmm. So a bit of a good perspective of the game. The Victoria gets the grand final.
Yeah.
Victoria gets the most AFL teams in the competition. Why can't Sydney have the first game of the AFL season? Why can't Queensland have the second game of the AFL season? People running amok about, Victorians. The one thing that Victorians don't have for once, we're complaining about it.
Yeah.
I just think there's so much bias involved.
I think you're right. Because people are like interstate fans complain about Vic bias, which often I think is just like ridiculous. But it's less a bias sort of in terms of like rules and sort of like what sort of like laws apply to which clubs and how they're treated by the AFL. But it's more sort of a general attitude thing, a cultural thing, where it's like most Victorians wouldn't, it's sort of a superiority thing in a way. Like, this is the home of football, so of course, you're going to start the first round here. Of course, the grand final is going to be here. Yeah. Because it's the home. It's sort of like a spiritual thing. Yeah.
People need to open up their minds, because if they want it to be the home of football, if they want it to be so spiritual and the best game in the world, well, look after your opponents as well. Because if we're going to continually throw our interstate clubs under the bus and not give them things like the first game of the season, well, then we won't have opposition, and the heartland won't be as hardy, and the spirituality won't be as spiritual. Yeah. And the game will just be Victorian, and we can return to calling it the Victorian Football League. That's people need to open their minds. We've got opponents in the game. The AFL Grand Final is played in Melbourne every single season. Yeah. Okay. Most teams are in Victoria based. That's just the last thing I want to say about it. And the one thing I think we should touch on before we move on is I think they're getting frustrated, and we're going to talk about it later on in the show, the AFL Grand Final Best of 3 series. These interstate clubs are starting to be proud of themselves, and they're starting to step on the toes of Victorians. They're saying, hey, where's the fairness in the competition? That's what's being asked now. Why is the Grand Final... Okay, we're going to get into it later, but 15 of the last 17 premierships have been won by Victorian clubs. Okay? So let's not get frustrated because the AFL, for once, has taken the game interstate. We're going to get into it later, though. That's a chat for another time. The AFL club bosses are not happy about it. So we'll get into that later on in the episode. But let's move on, okay? Unless there's anything else you wanted to mention.
No, I'll have a look.
I think we've addressed it. Mason Cox.
Well, you have.
Mason Cox.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of talk about him this round, okay? Let's go. He said that the stadium that the Giants play at is a showground for livestock. Yeah. And he made this comment. Then the Giants CEO, Dave Matthews, said, we hate Collingwood almost as much as Sydney. after Cox made that comment. Then on game day, the GWS team, they put a petting zoo in the stadium for the game with sheep and a Mason Cox cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
So they're just really having fun and games. Great work there. Good banter. But then Mason Cox decided to interrupt GWS's pre-match warm-up. He went straight through their warm-up, sort of took their ball, bumped into Shane Mumford, the ruck coach. And the AFL has asked him for a please explain about this. Now, Charlie, what are your thoughts on all this? And all of Mason Cox's thing. He probably didn't have the best game as well. He was a little bit quiet. But what's your take on it? A lot of people are getting into Mason Cox about these comments he made and all the talk.
Well, the story of me and Mason Cox begins in the Toffin town in the city. When I saw him once there and I smiled at him and he didn't smile back at me.
Oh, here we go. You do not like him, do you?
Well, I mean, that was just sort of the start of it. And then just tracking his career from then on, it's sort of been a succession of disappointments, I suppose, from me.
Wow, that's harsh. Surely you want to go back on those comments.
No, I do. I'd like to apologise for that. I'd like to apologise for that last sentence.
Yeah.
Though I should mention that you being, in the employment of a large media organisation, and I'm, more independent. So I'm not part of the establishment, and it means
but that's not what you really
what I
think.
say. I'm only governed by my own conscience.
Yeah. So conscience. And I'm the same. But tell us what you think.
I don't know what I meant by that. I just sounded sort of philosophical.
Well, tell us what you really think about Cox, because he's had a lot of success, and I've got a view on Mason Cox and what he's done in the lead up to this game, during it, afterwards.
Okay, assessing him objectively, like he's a trailblazer. He's one of the greatest international players of all time, because there's so few. Maybe I'm trying to make up for my last comments about him by saying that.
No, they're accurate. All accurate words.
Yeah, but he's just so American, which is fine. But his whole thing is about, just from sort of like observing him, it's about, it's sort of a word I kind of hate, but content. Like he's trying to generate things. He's got a podcast and he's saying like he'll give the final word on what happened on the field on his podcast. He's like, he's very active on Twitter, which is fine. And it's true that we want more characters in the game, but I feel like, it's forced. And even, the stare downs he does sort of when he takes the marks. It's good, great theatre, and I love that he does it, I suppose. But it does sometimes feel a little bit empty. And I think that's why people don't like it. Because they can sense that. They can sense that it's bravado without backing.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't help that he's American, and people don't like difference and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Sometimes he can cross the line with some things go over the top.
And I think that this was a case of that. Because, in
what sense?
Well, from what I read...
Are you saying it was over the top when he interrupted the warm-up?
Yeah. But, I mean, he didn't, I don't think he didn't go out of his way, hi, Shane Mumford, I'm going to bump you. He was, there was a merging of the two, ruck drills, and, there was a,
Yeah. Well...
there was a crash between the two, and Cox decided to do that. And that was clearly stupid. Anyone with, respect for the opposition or, playing the game in a good spirit would be I'm gonna move around. Especially if you consider it's the home ground and you want to get into that, the Giants are hosting them, if that means something to you. It's all just bravado and feels fake. And I think that Brent Daniels kind of articulated that on the Sunday Footy show.
He said he just,
which is really good to hear from a player being honest.
Well, what did Brent Daniels say? He said it was just bizarre. Which it was bizarre. But you know what? Mason Cox, I'm going to go in to defend him a bit, because I agree that he did go over the line there slightly. But you know what? It's not a big deal. The AFL probably didn't need to come out and say, please explain.
Yeah.
Please explain. It's in the footage. He was having... Just go back and read what he said. and there's a little bit of history. And guess what? That sold about probably 5,000 tickets, extra tickets to that game. He provided much advertisement. He got the CEO to say, "We hate Collingwood." They're strong words. These comments and these storylines and narratives help sell games. So I don't like the fact that when Mason Cox does one slight thing wrong, which he's probably, look, showground for livestock.
No, but that's the thing. The things that he gets slightly wrong, that's him getting it right. Because that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to generate that sort of stuff.
No, but he is. But he's trying to do it in the right way. He's not always trying to purely do these and make these comments and do these things for attention. He's doing this because this is his character. And
no, I disagree entirely.
So you think he's just doing this just for attention? Just for attention?
Yeah. I reckon he's a nicer guy than he's coming across. But he's really leaning into the sort of building himself up as a character, probably, for his post-match career.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to be around
absolutely.
in the AFL industry for ages, I reckon.
Absolutely, but he's stopped putting out his comments and views and talking to people on his podcast purely for the fact that he wants to also share stories about people. He wants to share his own travel stories. He's not here just to look at the stats of how many listeners his podcast gets, okay? So, and he's doing a good thing for the game as well. This isn't bad for the game entirely.
I know.
Okay, so
I got to say, it
people
feels
jumping on him and being being critical. Hold back a bit because he's bringing a little bit of entertainment to the game. I understand that you might not like some of it, and I don't like some of it, but he also gets a lot of stuff right. He also says stuff that people will like. People will be like, "Oh, thanks for that story. Oh, thanks for letting us know about." For example, in the Richmond game, right at the siren at the end of the game, he explained why he went in to defend. I think it was Ash Johnson or somebody. Yeah. Like Ash Johnson was putting a block on Mason Cox. Ash Johnson was putting a block on Mason Cox's opponent, so that Mason Cox can get free and lead. Okay, so he's explaining these things on his podcast, which is really good insights for fans.
That is true.
And explaining why, putting context behind football, telling narratives. So he does a lot. He does a lot right for the game, and a lot of these things he doesn't get praised for because it's not a big headline. All right, so but
and I got to say also it's different. Just in terms of this being my first podcasting experience, like making sort of judgments on players and their personalities, I'm very comfortable doing. But when there's a camera and microphone in front of your face, you sort of lose a little bit of your conviction. So you've convinced me that, I take back everything I said.
No.
If you didn't smile at me at the top in town, that's because you probably didn't see me. Because there's like a foot height difference and it was dark.
Yeah. Correct. Well, we'll move on.
I love you, Coxie.
He's a good man. He's good for the game. He's good for the game. We love him.
We do.
Sydney versus Melbourne.
We just came full circle there. Yep.
Let's crack into the games here, okay? Sydney versus Melbourne. This was the first game of the season. It was a boring first half. 3-1 in the first quarter. Then it was 4-2 in the second quarter. 2 goals kicked in a quarter. Sydney were dominating the game. They weren't leading by that much, but they were dominating, and it was just a boring game. I was like, what's this all about?
Yeah.
And then Melbourne came back in the fourth. They almost levelled the scoreline in the third quarter, but then they got smashed in the fourth to lose, and Sydney ended up winning. But what I liked about the game was Sydney's march to the ground and going through the streets of Sydney, walking to the game, fans lining up and watching them walk past. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
I didn't see any footage of that.
Yeah. Well, just imagine. Right? Because the listeners wouldn't have seen footage as well, potentially. 150 metres, there's a gap in the middle, and it's like the AFL parade, pretty much. It was like that. Just, there was a gap in the middle and a line of people. It was like a guard of honour. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. And that's going to attract fans to the game. It's going to make the players happy. It's pretty cool.
I mean, I don't know what you could possibly disagree with there.
Well, you're looking for someone to disagree with.
I'm always looking for something to disagree with when I'm
Well,
talking with you.
absolutely.
But it pains me to say that I can't there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was pretty cool. We'll move on. But yeah, just on that, police and crowd control, they want to do this on a regular basis, but it does cost money a little bit, and yeah, they're going to have to sort of work it all out with the police and making sure that they can make it all happen. But that was pretty cool to see. So well done to the Swans on that.
Yeah.
Brisbane versus Carlton. Now,
Okay.
this game
Okay.
was one of the best games
Just stop.
of the season.
All
I'll
right,
stop
so-
there. I'll hand it over to
yeah.
you. You
All
take
right.
over.
Where to
Look.
begin?
Well, off the top, I've got some notes here. Okay, let me read some of these things to you. Carlton are insane. No Wiedering, no Walsh. Docherty injured early in the game. They were down by 46 points midway through the second quarter. A quarter later, halfway through the third, they were up by 4 points. That's 46 points to 4 points. Ridiculous. 8 goals in a row they kicked. 4 of them
Yeah.
were from Charlie Curnow in that streak of 8 goals.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Carlton, they've lost 9 in a row at the Gabba. That's more than a decade.
Yeah.
9 in a row at the Gabba against the Lions they've lost. The result ended Brisbane's 14-match win streak at the Gabba. The last time Brisbane lost at the Gabba was in the last round of season 2022. This win...
Who was that to?
Can't remember off the top of my head, but against Melbourne, sorry. I've got it in my notes.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, Charlie. Unbelievable game.
Yeah.
Charlie Curnow, ridiculous. But when you were sitting there in that first quarter, getting absolutely pumped, Carlton, it was 7 goals to 2 at quarter time.
Yeah.
I was sitting there, I was like, Carlton, this is just so unexpected. Everyone talking about them pre-season, about, premiership favourites are in the bracket this year. They're in contention.
I don't know about that.
But Charlie, what a game and what a roller coaster.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking as it was happening that it was disappointing, but Brisbane is the hardest possible fixture you can have in 2024. And we weren't, I thought our efforts were pretty lackluster at the start, but I was like, well, it's Brisbane, that's just going to happen.
Did you think that you'd come back?
No, of course not.
No one was thinking
No,
that.
of course not. But 46 points, I mean, it's just a completely surreal victory. And the funny thing about being a Carlton supporter, especially a young Carlton supporter at the moment, is that probably 3 of the best 5 wins we've had in our lives have happened in the past 4 games. The Sydney win, the Melbourne elimination semi-final, and then this. Because this was the best home and away win we've had that I can remember.
Unbelievable.
Maybe even that any team has ever had.
Yeah.
Ever.
McKay kicking the winner.
Well, that was obviously so poetic and so nice because the attention on him has been ridiculous from the start. Obviously he had a less successful year than the Coleman year and stuff. And his goal kicking was not as good as you'd expect from someone who's paid to do it, but he's such a good player in other ways as well, which is something that Carlton supporters would notice more than opposition fans because they only really sort of tune into his footballing actions when he's lining up for a set shot. But around the ground, he's great as well. And he proved that as well in Brisbane. He set up a really good goal. I can't remember for who.
Yeah.
And then he kicked that one, which was just so
Yeah. And at the
so
end,
nice.
At the end of the game, ran that ball over the line as well.
Yeah.
He was exceptional.
But I should also just say that if you allow me to just monologue a little bit about Carlton.
Go ahead.
As you've heard me do for 8 or so years now. And also for context for our listeners, flashback to 2018. Brendan Bolton's doing his best at Carlton, but it's the worst season we've had, maybe ever. And at recess after the weekends on Monday mornings, I would have to effectively hold press conferences because I was being held personally responsible for Carlton's losses, and the constant humiliation was my cross to bear purely because of the man opposite me. And it was just absolutely sort of traumatic experience. And they probably put our relationship as friends, at risk because it was just relentless. But it did make me, a better footy supporter, I think, because of that experience. But it's just such a nice thing to think now that, you know, I'm here and Carlton...
Still going.
You know, but just that Carlton have just turned it around.
Correct.
And something's... like, I was just at Golden Plains Music Festival. I literally just got back.
You're doing well. You're doing well doing well today.
I'm pretty sleep deprived. I won't put it in like I won't actually say what the stats are because it will seem a bit ridiculous, but I'm very sleep deprived.
And look at him. He's flying.
And I am, because the energy at the festival, like the music was great.
Yeah.
Golden Plains is a great festival, but I saw, and I was counting, at least 20 different bits of Carlton merchandise. And in the end, I had to run back to my own tent and put on the Quicksilver collaboration with Carlton bathers I brought in case there was a river to swim in, which there wasn't. But that didn't matter in the end because the bathers were just good to have the Carlton logo on me, because I was thinking about the solidarity that the Carlton supporters were having when they crossed and they both had hats and they looked at each other like, how good is this? Anyway, I was counting this obsessively, thinking, this is so special. And then we watched the Slingers, good band from Melbourne, perform at about midday. And it was a great set, and it was, you know, the momentum was really increasing. And then the lead singer put his guitar down and just sort of got down to dancing and singing. And then for the last song, he took off his T-shirt. And I don't know, you know, I guess that's pretty standard behaviour. And then he put on a Carlton Guernsey. I would say something like, you know, around 1998, old Carlton Guernsey.
No.
And he sung the last song, and, you know, I turned to my friend who's also a Carlton supporter, and we said, how about this? Look at us. It was a magical moment.
Wow. What did... That's incredible.
Yeah.
Was what was the crowd's reaction?
I mean, considering that it felt like there were a lot of Carlton supporters at the festival because of all the insignias I was seeing, it was pretty positive. And I mean, even like, you know, even opposition fans have to respect that win. But that's the thing about Carlton. You know, we make it all about us. That was a round one game. And a lot could go wrong from here, but it's all about celebrating. Yeah. Well, no, we'll wrap it up, but you knew this was going to go for a while.
Oh, mate, it deserves the time. Yeah. And just to finish up, I was sitting watching
We're just getting started.
Well, this is unbelievable, but we were sitting watching the game, right? Alongside, I was sitting on the couch where you are, watching the game with my mate Henry Chomley, my housemate. And throughout the game...
Also a personal friend of mine.
Yeah. He'd say some things, and it'd be like, mate, spot on. So we started a thing called Henry's Notes. Yeah. Right? So I'll just read a few of those notes out to you.
How involved was Henry in the introduction of Henry's Notes as a segment to this podcast?
It was mutual. We just thought of it mutually. It was brilliant. Yeah. But Henry's Notes, okay. Carlton supporters in suits will look stupid leaving the stadium if they lose. This was about early in the second quarter.
Disagree.
Loves how Brisbane sporting teams have same colours. I thought that was a good observation of his. The Broncos have the same colours. The Queensland Origin team, and obviously the Lions as well, and the Queensland Bulls in the cricket, and probably a number of other teams. That was a good observation. 8 in a row to leading by 3. I would love to know what was said at halftime. Just a good comment from him.
Okay. Can I intervene
you
here?
You
I'm not
can.
sure what's so special about the comment that I wonder what was said at halftime.
Oh, look, it was
If Henry's listening,
it was
he knows I love him, but I wonder what was said at halftime. That is hardly, you know, incredible.
No, look,
insight.
at the time. Oh, well,
but
look,
it's true.
Maybe it wasn't a good comment, but at the time, it was a good comment. And then he said he puts knee on McGovern. With 5 minutes to go, right? Do you remember that moment?
No, good observation, because I didn't recall.
So he puts knee on McGovern. Hippwood went up for a specky.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's pretty much like a king hit in terms of the force. So you know when they go up for speckies and you accidentally knee the player in the back of the head.
Yeah.
That's in terms of the force. That's like.
But the thing about
hit, isn't it?
Yeah, but the thing about a king hit that makes it so bad isn't the level of force, which is obviously a big part of it. It's the fact that it's it's the ethics behind it. It's the catching someone off guard.
Yeah. Well,
A lot of things are probably...
No, well, that's why I said in terms of force.
Yeah, I know, but like...
Okay. Now
Yeah.
look, now we're just talking about this.
Okay, yeah, we are.
Now, the AFL,
Yeah.
like, this is pretty severe. He's got up for a spec. You need him in the back of the head. That's concussion
Yeah.
areas. That's quite bad in terms of
Yeah.
injuries. So, should the AFL jump on board with that and think of an idea to stop that, pay a free kick against? Because that like it's funny how many players. Well, it might not be funny, but it's surprising how many players get back up after copying a knee like that. But it's a talking point. So anyway, that was in Henry's notes, which was good. But we'll move on. Is my camera rolling, by the way? Just let me know.
It is.
Okay, brilliant. Hewett, his punch on Neil. Hewett, they were having a little back and forth, bump in at the stoppage.
Yeah.
And George Hewett accidentally got him on the chin.
Yeah.
Now, this is the updated rule. The action of a player ruled to have committed a strike when intentionally shoving or fending an opponent will now be graded as intentional rather than careless. So that pretty much means that if you shove or fend a player, and it's committed to a strike,
Yeah.
pretty much it's saying you're going to be in more strife if you make contact with the player with a strike. Anyway, I'm just surprised that he hasn't been suspended for a week here. Very surprised. Very surprised. When Pal Pepper's getting 4 weeks for a bump, and George Hewett here has clipped someone on the chin and he's getting a fine.
I agree that like it's not that. That should probably be a suspension. It's not even that different from the action that Gaff did on Brayshaw.
Exactly. That's
But
the
I've
point.
always thought that was, it's hard to really know. But I've always thought that was really unlucky.
Yeah.
For, obviously, more for Brayshaw, but for Gaff as well. I don't think he was trying to,
These are just
cause that much damage.
These are just the little inconsistencies like that annoy me in the tribunal and the suspensions. But we'll move on. Docherty's injury, like just devastating news. Third ACL for him. Came off the ground. I think it was in the second quarter. He recently overcame testicular cancer, and just devastating for him, really, isn't it? There's not much more to say, but yeah, what a legend of the club, and hopefully he can get back from it. But yeah, like that.
He will, I'm sure.
That was a sour
It was
to the win.
And also Kitty Coleman, kind of similar sorts of players, I guess, and they both got taken off the ground because of ACLs.
Yeah.
Coleman is so good.
Coleman's
At the
a
grand
star.
final, he was the best player on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, he was, and Bobby Hill was.
Bobby Hill was great too.
Well, yeah, we'll move on. Kitty Coleman, though, you mentioned him. That's a good point. Devastating for him as well. We're just going to pause the episode there. If you enjoy our content at Head Over the Footy, you may consider sponsoring us. We've got a number of options available. Just contact us on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll go from there. Now, I'll let you get back into the episode. Moving on now to Gold Coast and Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
This game, you didn't get to see it, did you? You were away, but we'll get into it because Gold Coast had their best.
Yeah.
Dimmer Hardwick's first game as coach of the Gold Coast Suns. Yeah. They had the biggest Suns lead at halftime in club history and the most ever consecutive goals, 11. So just already breaking records in his first half of football. Just incredible. The Suns led 11-8 to 2 goals, 1 at half-time. So leading there by a fair margin. And Matt Rowell, he's an absolute freak. 20 clearances, the second most in AFL history. Last season, he broke the AFL record for the most tackles in a single season. He's just going from strength to strength. In the off-season, he spoke about wanting to try and get faster and improve that. But Damien Hardwick just said to him, focus on your strengths, do them as well as you can. And that's what he's been doing, and it showed in this game. 20 clearances is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
And, yeah, a really good game. Richmond fought back, however. in the third quarter. After only kicking 2 goals in the first half, they kicked 6 goals in the third term, and they brought it back from 67 points down to 25. So it was game on, and they kicked 7 straight goals. The Tigers, 7 straight goals.
Yeah.
So
you feel a bit strange about it if you were a Richmond supporter.
Yeah, you would, and
having Hardwick mastermind your demise.
Yeah, you would, and
he abandoned them.
Yeah, and there would have been a lot of that going on. Like, obviously, Hardwick knows the Richmond players so well, so that would have had to have been an advantage for Hardwick and the Suns. But yeah, it was Maurice Rioli, Josh Gibskis. They laid these big tackles early in the third quarter, and from that point onwards, Richmond kicked 7 straight goals after the Suns kicked 11 in a row. So really good game from the Suns, obviously. But Richmond, some good positives there. At halftime, 2 goals. You're sitting there and you're like, amaze, Richmond, this is not going well. Similar to Carlton.
That's a pretty early judgment.
I know, but that's what you're thinking at the time. It's human nature. First half of football, and you've only kicked 2 goals, and you've let the other team kick 11. Yeah. So it's not looking good, but they turned it around. And to their credit...
Well, they still lost by almost 40 points.
Well, they still lost, but a lot of positives there. For them to kick 7 goals in a row was awesome.
No, and I can't, as you exposed me, I can't comment too much on it as I didn't see the game. But in terms of analysis or insight, I can say that I was tasked with tagging Matt Rowell.
Here we go. Go on.
As a 10-year-old, Alfred Crescent Oval, Fitzroy Juniors versus Canterbury. He was known then as sort of the Messiah, and and for a quarter I was tasked with tagging him, and he kicked the best goal on the run from 50 on me, and I came off and I remember I was like, it's impossible. I said that to one of the assistant coaches, and the assistant coach was like, no, it's not.
Yeah, wow.
And then the rest is history.
There you go.
Has he been tagged effectively
since then?
I'm sure he has.
You've upped your game in tagging. You're a very good tagger.
I do, and I love tags as well. Ryan Crowley is a hero of mine.
Well, I played against Matt Rowell, actually, in school footy. I played a game against Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, and Nick Dacos. It's a pretty good 3 players in the same team, playing for Carey Grammar, I think it was. I played on Nick Dacos. He was lining up on me at half-back.
He was lining up on you?
Yeah, he ran rings around me. Yeah. he racked up the footy like no one else, and I was just a spectator.
2 Macedonians.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll move on. GWS Collingwood, this was another interesting game. All the games saw one team dominate and then the other team come back. It was topsy-turvy, and this was another one. The Giants, Collingwood were leading early. They kicked, I think, the first 2 or 3 goals. They were up and about. But a guy by the name of Callum Brown had a standout game, his career best 5 goals in his 30th AFL game. He had a brilliant match, and I was really excited by what he was doing out there. He kicked the Giants' first 3 goals, and that was when Collingwood was on top. Yeah. So really crucial. And but you know what I didn't like? He kicked the first 3 goals of the game for the Giants, and with 6 minutes left in the first quarter, guess what they did?
Well, I'm sure he needed a break.
Why? Exactly. They did that. They took him off. Why would you take him off after you've kicked 3 goals in 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, and they decide to take him off? I don't get it. I know rotations are a thing and they happen and they're sort of planned. Yeah. But when a guy has kicked 3 goals, he is the hot hand. Keep him on the ground. He's not going to kick a goal from the bench. Why take him off? Why?
Well, I feel like this debate happens a lot. And I sort of am from the same school of thought as you, which is more, I guess, traditional and sort of is kind of like, look, if someone's good, keep them on. You know, like, to hell with all the statistics and sports science and logistics of it all. Just like let them play footy. It's a chaotic, random game anyway. Like, it doesn't need to be sort of computerized in that way. But, I mean, I'm sure there's a real justification for it.
There isn't. Okay, computer.
How about this? He's tired. He's played a lot of the game. He's obviously expended a lot of energy that quarter. And they want him fresh for the second quarter because they'd rather have a good start to the second quarter with him on the ground than have him tired for the start of the second quarter. Yeah. And their game plan changed, whereas they wanted to finish off the first quarter without as much attack and more to sort of consolidate what they had.
That's not a bad shout, but...
Would you even say that perhaps is a justification for it?
Well, yeah, it could be. But the adrenaline's pumping. You're in form.
Yeah.
You've kicked 3 goals.
Yeah. No, I agree.
You're tired, but you've kicked 3 goals. Yeah. You're killing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't take him off.
Yeah, you're tired, but you've got something special happening.
Obviously, there is that.
It's true.
There is that argument.
Yeah.
But you leave a guy on. If GWS lost this game, this would have been a talking point. People like this would be more relevant and it'd be a talking point. Why take the guy off that's been dominating? Anyway,
I don't know about
we'll move on. I like Connor Iden's interview post game with Brian Taylor. That was fantastic. He hadn't seen his father and I think it was his brother in more than 10 years.
I know.
They come to watch him play his AFL game for the first time, and how good was his dad? He was a character. Thinking that he could beat him in a 2K, and then saying he needs he'll need a T-fib or whatever. It was just a cracking interview.
It was so emotional.
Yeah,
which was good.
It was.
BT handled it well, I thought.
He did. Good interview.
Yeah.
Mason Cox, we've obviously spoken about him, so we won't go back there. But Callum Ward, so tough. Brayden Maynard laid that tackle on him, which it's been confirmed there's been no penalty for Maynard, even though Ward dislocated his shoulder.
Oh, really? That reminds me of something.
It reminds me of something too, but we won't go there, and I'm sure everyone knows what it's about. Guy by the name of Brayshaw. But blood rule.
We just went there.
Well, we won't go any further. Wardy's so tough. I'll tell you why. The umpire called for a blood rule, and then the umpire waited for him to clear the area. The umpire's like, I'm waiting for you. Clear the area, Callum. And because Callum's shoulder was popped out, and he was an injured player. But he wasn't. He was injured. He was there, and his shoulder was popped out, but he was ready to go for the next contest. Yeah. The umpire, for some reason, called a blood rule, which I don't know why. But he was like, I'm waiting for you. No, there was no blood. But he was just waiting for him to go off. He literally told him, you're injured, Callum Ward, go off. Because his shoulder was popped out. But for some reason, Callum Ward just stayed on the ground. Yeah. I don't know why. Anyway, I just thought that was something that caught my eye.
He's very low profile for how good he is.
He is. He's a star. Hopefully he recovers well and all that. Other bits as well throughout the week, goal reviews. I noticed, and I don't know if you did, but they were quicker. Felt like they were happening quicker, the goal reviews, especially on the obvious ones. I enjoyed how they did it all quickly. And BT actually he gave a bit of feedback. He was like, they need to sharpen the graphics up because the graphics take about 3 seconds to complete. Like, you start the graphic and it takes 3 seconds for the ball to go through the post and say behind or goal or no score. So he's spot on there. They need to quicken that up because people these days, mate, 1 second and you're bored. So, so that was a good point from BT. What I didn't like, though, is the fact that so many of the goal umpires needed the score review to happen for something pretty obvious. Well, just back yourself in a bit more, goal umpire. Don't like. I know the technology is there, but back yourself in is what my view is.
Guess who backed themselves in? The umpire who was umpiring Adelaide versus Sydney, which is probably one of the most consequential umpiring decisions in ever. Yeah, that was the reason that Adelaide didn't play finals.
Oh yeah,
and that
absolutely.
was because a goal umpire backed himself.
That's a really good point you make there. But that was an umpire's error. That was a sort of outlier. I think some of these other ones are quite more obvious.
Yeah, well, I wonder if we'll ever get to a point where goal umpires are just considered completely irrelevant. Yeah. And expendable, sort of like linesmen in the tennis.
Well, that's another thing. It could go down that path. Yeah. And one day it could come down to finances and costs. Yeah. So, I wouldn't be surprised in 20 years if we're sitting here and there's no goal umpire there.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you compare it to field umpires, because that's just the most subjective thing ever. Like
Yeah.
that could never be done. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obvious. I mean, obviously,
Well, it
practically
could
it's
be done.
impossible. But like, even I reckon theoretically, it would be impossible to umpire a game of footy using a computer. Because there's all this like, I mean, this is
Well,
a
computer,
discussion.
yeah. But you can have a guy in the
Like-
stands on a mic, free kick.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that. I mean, I guess that's what everyone's doing anyway. They just don't have mics. But
Yeah.
Um,
And they have to run as well.
yeah, but no, I actually don't think it would be even possible to do that, because like it's a whole other discussion. But it's very interesting, the human, like you can have all these stipulations and like categories and like rule 12A to 54Z, but within all of that there's room for like just feel for the game and intuition, which some umpires have and some don't. You can tell the ones that don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you got to have that as an umpire.
Like, say for example, when they always do sort of like if it's a 50-50 call and they judge it one way, then I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, here's one. It's like if a player's like marked a ball that was touched
Yeah.
and then they get tackled, the umpire's less likely to call holding the ball because the player didn't realise it was touched.
Yeah.
But that's the player's fault. They didn't realise it was touched.
Yeah. But yeah, you got to factor that in.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas goal umpiring is completely different. It's either,
Yeah. Well, we'll move on. Umpiring icks. There are a few things that just just annoyed me a little bit.
Yeah.
Not major, but just little things. An umpire yelling out in one of the games, Nick, just before Brett Daniels took his set shot, and it put him off, Brett Daniels, because the umpire was saying, Nick Dacos, I think it was, clear the area. Like, he might have crept into 9.5 metres rather than 10, like in the protected area zone.
Yeah.
Umpire, don't yell Nick 1,000 times. If a player's going to make an infringement,
Yeah.
pay the free 50 metres. Like, don't yell out Nick. And especially don't do it just as a guy's about to take their set shot. And Brett Daniels, I reckon, from what I saw, he was shaking his head at the umpire after missing the goal to the left. And, like, just pay a 50, pay a free kick, whatever you need to do. Another thing that annoyed me, Mason Cox, he tried to go on the mark in D50. So someone took a mark inside 50, and Mason Cox, the biggest guy on the ground, get him to go on the mark, to put his hands up. Someone was already on the mark. Now, Mason Cox was right there. He wanted to go on the mark. Why can't Mason Cox come on the mark and the other guy go? I know the stand rule is there in place, but you're allowed to make these little quick switches.
Wait,
Like-
actually, what is the rule there? So,
Well,
are you saying that Mason
Once the
Cox should be able to go on the mark?
Well, if he
for
wants to
every
go on the
set
mark,
shot?
and if someone's just taken a mark, 2 seconds later, you got 2 people standing where the mark's been taken. One can choose over the other who wants to go on the mark. It doesn't have to be the closest player. Anyway, the umpire's like, nah, he's already there. Mason, you can't go on the mark.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, he can't go on the mark. Is it in the rule book? Like, don't be so picky. Just a little thing. Loving the umpires, but just a little thing that annoyed me over the weekend.
Okay.
Another thing, first-year debutants across the opening round, these first-year players, so little, 18 years old, these players, and
Yeah.
they're going out there playing footy
Yeah.
against Patrick Cripps. Like, just incredible scenes for these guys that have just come out of
I know, yeah.
wherever they've come from. They're 18 years old, they're a bit smaller built than all the other boys, and they're out there playing their first game of footy, and they're copping bumps, they're copping taps on the back, like just all these little things. It's just incredible to see.
Do you like it when opposition, say like it's a sort of a really hyped young player, like say Harley Reid, do you like it when opposition teams, when they're sort of playing him for the first time, sort of really give it to the player in question?
No.
Or do you think that that's...
Well, you can give it to him, but like this is one of those things. Like, it's entertainment for the game. I'm not gonna get into someone for getting into a young player, but it depends how they do it.
Yeah, I remember Watts getting
So
that treatment. I guess they all get it.
There's things that are sort of acceptable and there's things that are not.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going to bump someone, and it just depends on the situation. Like, if it's, and I'm not calling it, like, stamp out any of that nonsense, like, off the side of play.
I love it when players become bullies and they, like, target one. I reckon it's just such good theatre.
Yeah. It doesn't sound good coming out of the mouth that we love it when players become bullies. But
we do.
But, like, that's the game in a way sometimes. When you're a new player. But the umpires need to make sure it doesn't get out of hand, and it's all sort of within the rules. So as long as they're doing that, it's all good. Moving on to footy tipping. Great week. Thanks to everyone that tipped. I had a shocker. 2 out of 4, I think. You had 3 out of 4, which is good. One person in our tipping comp of more than 70 people got 4 out of 4. Everyone had made a mistake. So well done to Mia Shortis. You're the Morts Meets Tipster of the Week. $10 prize for you. The first one to ever win the prize. So well done, Mia Shortis. Clap for her. She needs to message the Head Over the Footy page and prove that it's her account, and then we're able to
send in the birth certificate.
Send in the birth certificate if you like, and we'll be able to send that prize over. So well done to Mia.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I changed my tip to Melbourne on Thursday night. I had Sydney down, and I don't know why. I just changed my tip to Melbourne.
Terrible.
That wraps up
Disaster.
opening round. We'll move on now.